Welcome to Oasis. The clock says 4 o'clock and we only get 30 minutes, so I'm going to go. A number of you have come up to me when you saw that I was doing a program on the National Cathedral and told me stories about your visit to the cathedral. So the first question is, how many people have been to Washington National Cathedral? Excellent. And how many people have been there for worship? Anybody? Excellent. And the third question is, how many folks know the other official name of Washington National Cathedral? It's the Church of St. Peter and St. Paul is the official name that it's known by. Before I go any further, I want to do about 3 credits. Usually those roll at the end of the movie, but I want to do them now because I'll forget. I don't come with any expertise particularly about this. I come because I went to the National Cathedral about twice a year for over a period of about 15 years and had some personal experiences that really meant a lot. So if you're looking for a historian's perspective, that's not me. And if you're looking for somebody who's really studied it, that's not me. But I am going to tell a bit about my story. I'll give you a few facts, though. The credits are Jack Fisher helped me with some technology that was above my pay grade. And Jean Roop shared a couple of images, several images of the cathedral, for which I'm grateful. And I need to credit Google Images because very few of these are mine. And I need to credit this guidebook, which Donna bought me when we were moving from the area, and she knows how much I have appreciated times at the cathedral. And I really recommend that guidebook, and I'm willing to loan it if anyone has interest. Donna and I last pastored in North Central Maryland, and as I said, I would go to the cathedral a couple times a year, usually the Sunday after Easter and the Sunday after Christmas. I come from Church of the Brethren tradition, and the cathedral is a very different tradition, and that's part of what drew me and part of why I went. One of the first times I walked in, I looked up and said, I wonder how Joys and Concerns would go in here, which kind of speaks to the traditions. You got stuck with this Oasis because the last time we went, I came back and I brought Brian Daniels the program from worship, the printed program, and he said to Marie, you know, he could do an Oasis about this. And so that's how we're here today. Maybe my apologies. I'm going to do a little bit about the beginnings of the cathedral, a little bit about the church that's hosted in the cathedral. There is a congregation there. And then some of my personal experiences. If anyone goes home and says, I don't believe that he really went there, I think he just cooked it up. There's my evidence that I've been there. The cathedral dots the skyline in Washington, such as the skyline is. There are height restrictions by city ordinance, city decree. And there is a formula for figuring out the height which a building can be built. It's based on the width of the street that it's going to be built on. That's city engineering. Some of you probably know that better than I do. But when you look across the city, you can easily see where the cathedral is. This is the last time that we worshiped there. A little teaser about the history. The idea for a sacred home for all Americans in the nation's capital is as old as the country itself. Pierre L'Enfant's original design for the new capital city included a great church for national purposes, an idea that sat idle until a congressional charter authorized a cathedral dedicated to religion, education, and charity. And we're talking about 1893, the process started. The dean of the cathedral, essentially the pastor of the cathedral, is Randy Hollerith currently. During the time that I went, I was able to hear 3 deans who preached. Sam Lloyd, who's an excellent preacher who went to is it First South Church in Boston, the historic church in Boston. He came from there and he went back to there after his cathedral time. And then Gary Hall was there for a time. a Californian who was dean of the cathedral, raised in a circus family, and came to lead the cathedral and did it very effectively. And then Randy Hollerith came from the Episcopal Church in Richmond, Virginia. This is Pierre L'Enfant, who laid out the city of Washington. He was Paris educated and came to this part of the world when to fight in the Revolution, and he served under Washington at Valley Forge. And when it was time to design a city, Washington had become aware of his abilities in design and art and such, and so he did it. When you take the double-decker bus tour in Washington, they tell you that when L'Enfant laid out a map of the city, he put his wine glass down, and everywhere he put his wine glass down, there was a traffic circle developed. If you've ever been to Washington, you get that one, because there's a traffic circle everywhere. We need to do land acknowledgements as well, and this was land on which the Anacostans lived, and the Piscataway and the Pamunkey. So L'Enfant laid this out and designated a place where the cathedral would be built on a hill called St. Alban. It's about 300 feet in elevation. And then the Bishop of Maryland in the Episcopal Church was William Perrett, and he began entertaining conversations about a cathedral foundation in 1891 so that they could begin putting funds away to build this massive church. I don't quite understand how all these pieces fit together, but a charter came from Congress to build the cathedral, and it was signed by President Benjamin Harrison. And this was the first bishop of Washington in the Episcopal Church, and Henry Satterley played key roles in the construction of the cathedral and a number of decisions that were made at that time. This gets us to about 1896. The first tract of land on St. Alban was bought for $245,000, and pre-1900, that's a pile of money. It's a pile of money now, but it's really a pile of money in that time frame. And it was purchased from Amzie Barber, who was a real estate baron and also an asphalt baron. I didn't know there were such people, but he was big in the business of asphalt in the city of Washington. This is the architect and student who were employed to design the cathedral. Bodley had significant experience designing cathedrals in Europe, so he was a natural to design the Washington National Cathedral. Sorry, wrong direction. And in, I think it's about 1912, the foundation stone is laid for the cathedral with the participation of President Theodore Roosevelt. A crowd of 10,000 people gathered to begin this project. And some of Roosevelt's words were, "Godspeed, the work begun this noon." And the foundation stone was laid under what is now the Bethlehem Chapel. And in the foundation stone, there is a rock from Bethlehem that is a part of that foundation. Construction imagery. The first part of it that was completed was the Bethany Chapel, and that's as it existed when it was first finished at the top and at the bottom as it exists today. There are, I think, 6 chapels that are a part of the cathedral. And as we all know, memorial services and funerals for presidents and prominent figures are routinely held at the cathedral. There are some named there. Another important date along the way was 1940, when the cathedral was designated as the seat of the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church. So the Episcopal Church ties were really established at that point, and presiding bishops are now always installed at the cathedral. In
Keep your chin down when you talk. It gets a lot
Hello.
better.
in 1990, the process of building the thing was completed. That's 83 years to work at the cathedral. George H.W. Bush was a part of the ceremonies at the completion of the cathedral. This shows you the view from the west entrance toward the front, toward the high altar, beyond those archways. From the west entrance to the high altar, it's 1/10 of a mile. Let's dip in a couple places with some of the art that's in the cathedral. You could do 3 hours on just the art that's in this building. This is ex nihilo, which is the facade at the west entrance. It was done by an artist, Frederick Hart. It expresses creation. Human beings seem to emerge from the background. I think I understood someone to say that the entire biblical story is told from the west entrance to the high altar. The high altar has at the center of it the reigning Christ, which would pick up Revelation. And this work of art at the west entrance would pick up Genesis, obviously. So through windows and art displayed throughout the cathedral, the entire story is told. We also know the American story is told and symbolized in the cathedral. There is a window honoring the space shot, and there's a piece of lunar rock in that window. There are bays that honor Lincoln and Washington and other significant people in the nation's story. That's the high altar at the front. It was made from limestone from a quarry outside of Jerusalem, from where it is believed came the stone used to build King Solomon's temple. 10 stones are set into the floor in front of the altar, representing the 10 Commandments. These 6-inch square stones were brought to the cathedral from the Chapel of Moses on Mount Sinai. Another significant point of interest in the cathedral is the pulpit, which is the Canterbury pulpit. It asserts the cathedral's commitment to the spoken word. It was one of the first furnishings given to the cathedral. Before construction ever began, Bishop Henry Yates Satterley set about gathering materials from sacred sites in the Holy Land in England that could be fashioned into essential liturgical furnishings, such as the high altar, the baptismal font, and the pulpit. Satterley accepted a gift from the Archbishop of Canterbury of stones from the 16th century bell tower of Canterbury Cathedral, which was undergoing repair and restoration in the 1880s. So these stones were donated to the Washington Cathedral from the Canterbury Cathedral. W. Douglas Carew, from a sketch created by Satterley, designed the Canterbury pulpit. It stands 10 feet high, and it depicts the English translation of the Bible. Each panel depicts an illustration, an illustrious church leader. The Venerable Bede, a Benedictine monk and church historian, dictating on his deathbed a translation of the Gospel of John into Anglo-Saxon. Stephen Langston, Archbishop of Canterbury, with the barons of Runnymede handing the Magna Carta to King John for his signature. The martyrdom of William Tyndale, who was burned at the stake for efforts to translate, print, and distribute the entire English Bible. You can see separating the panels are these statues of four folks who are identified with the translation of the Bible into English. Alfred the Great, who gave his people the 10 Commandments and the Lord's Prayer in their own language. John Wycliffe, whose Bible was issued in 1383. Lancelot Andrewes, foremost translator of the 1611 King James Version and Brooke Foss Westcott, who was a leader in the company that set forth the revised version in 1881. I assume that's a revision of the King James Version. It's a remarkable piece of work. When the preachers are especially elderly, we hope they make it up the, whatever it is, 10 steps that go up to this pulpit where one preaches. A few of the pipes for the magnificent organ that are part of the cathedral. I think there are 10,000 of them, literally. The bell tower and the carillon are another point of interest. I didn't record all the facts and figures of the bell tower and the bells. You may say thank you later. There are several groups of bell ringers, though, and they do perform ringing the bells in the carillon. If any of you have followed news, you know of the changing of the windows at the National Cathedral. There were some that were taken out and some that were put in. This is a piece from CBS Saturday Morning. I didn't know there was such a thing. I knew about CBS Sunday Morning, but there's a CBS Saturday Morning. These are the windows that were removed, and this tells about the
new art to
new
honor
ones.
our nation's history and heritage. For nearly 70 years, stained glass windows in Washington's National Cathedral depicted Confederate leaders. They've been gone now for 6 years, and this week, new windows telling a different story were unveiled. Adriana Diaz got an early look at the new designs and their new meaning.
If the walls could talk at Washington's National Cathedral, they recount some of our nation's most profound moments,
The best father a son or daughter could have.
where we're reminded our leaders are only human. But these walls have also upheld a stain in stained glass, tributes to Confederate generals Robert E. Lee, Thomas Stonewall Jackson, and their flag. They were removed in 2017, and this past week, their replacements were revealed.
I couldn't miss it. Wanted to be here to witness it.
I've never seen anything like it. So I'm like, wow.
It's a celebration of the Black experience, a still image that captures the kinetic energy of protesting in the pursuit of justice.
It's pretty brilliant, pretty bright.
It's glowing. It's the work of renowned Chicago artist Carrie James Marshall, whose pieces can go for millions. His price for this, $18.65, a nod to slavery's end.
I think these windows simply announce themselves to the passerby in a way that most of the other windows don't.
Also, unlike the other windows here, there's a wheelchair, no faces, and
In a church, you're so used to looking up at the windows and seeing white skin. And seeing black skin here, it's almost like you have to do a double take.
I don't think these windows exclude anybody. I think the activity and what they're engaged in is something that everybody can partake in.
There's a different light that comes out of that bay as it comes out of any of the other bays here at the cathedral.
Randy Hallworth, Dean of the National Cathedral, says not everyone agreed with the change.
There was a lot of resistance that we were removing history. Part of what we try to do is to have those conversations and then just to know that we were doing what we thought was absolutely the best thing.
Below are words by poet Elizabeth Alexander,
Each day,
who performed at President Obama's first inauguration.
For a lot of people, poetry goes over their heads.
I do know that a lot of people get nervous around poetry, but poetry is just words and we all have them. The final line of the poem, may this portal be where the light comes in. That can illuminate the beauty of the past and also sometimes the untruths of the past.
Funeral services are held at Washington Cathedral.
Their art will live on in a place that serves as a spiritual home for the nation, where Dr. Martin Luther King gave his last sermon.
Was all the moral universe is long, but it been short justice.
A permanence that leaves this poet speechless.
They will outlive me by a very, 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 very long measure. And what that reminds me of is the power of art. And what that means is actually beyond words for me right now.
Carrie, I see you nodding.
So it really could make a contribution to the transformation of the nation towards the goals that it had established and set for itself, liberty and justice for all. I don't think I could have asked for anything more meaningful to have done in my life.
For CBS Saturday Morning, Adriana Diaz, Washington.
I love how much he charged.
Yeah.
$18.65.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they are very proud of the gesture, and they see it as a gesture of being open, and it is wonderful to see.
Yeah, they're beautiful too. Absolutely beautiful, not just the message that they sent.
Absolutely.
Now a permanent part of the cathedral. Some of you may recall that in 2011, a 5.8 magnitude earthquake struck the Washington area and caused about $38 million worth of damage to the National Cathedral. The 112 gargoyles who hang out around the cathedral don't like it when the earth shakes, and a lot of them came off and there was a lot of other damage done in the cathedral, and they are still recovering from that now, a dozen years later. I remember going and seeing at one period when I went down this netting up above there that was put in place because there was some reservation about what could fall from above, and folks were coming in now for worship and attending the services, and they had that netting up as a precaution. And they have been fundraising. They continue to fundraise to work at that $38 million, and they've made a lot of progress toward it. A couple of the members of the staff of the cathedral are Masons, and they literally work there every day, working at repairing damage from the earthquake of 2011. Some of you will know that Matthew Shepard and his story. You will know Matthew Shepard and his story. In 1998, at the age of 21, Matthew's death occurred from a vicious anti-gay hate crime that shocked the conscience of the nation and electrified the movement for LGBTQ rights. It was through the work of the Matthew Shepard Foundation, his parents, Dennis and Judy. Shepard helped pass the country's first federal hate crimes legislation, the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act, which was signed into law by President Obama. Matthew Shepard was entrusted to the cathedral 20 years after his death in 2018. And one of the reflections of the cathedral is here in the safety of the cathedral, he has a home, and pilgrims have a place to honor a young man who changed the nation. Every year for Matt's birthday, December 1, his parents gather with the cathedral community to celebrate his life and legacy and to advocate for a world that is more just and tolerant and compassionate. Looks a tiny bit like the front of the Manchester Church of the Brethren right now. This is the rose window in the west wing of the cathedral. It's the largest window in the cathedral. A couple minutes on the church within the church, the Episcopal congregation that gathers at the cathedral. This is some of the social justice outreach work that the cathedral does. There's a lot of local community outreach through food pantries and soup kitchens and that sort of work. And folks who are members of the cathedral and others who attend are regularly invited to be a part of that work. There's a creation care ministry, a gun violence prevention ministry, LGBTQIA alliance, sanctuary ministry, prison ministry, and a racial justice task force. Like any other church, there is a method system for making pastoral care needs known, and a staff person will respond. One of the many pastors on the staff. A way for submitting prayer requests. A core statement of beliefs for the cathedral, a house of prayer for all people, rooted in Episcopal Church, yet open to all. We believe every person is a beloved child of God, and we aim to live out our baptismal covenant with respect, to respect the dignity of every human being. Episcopalians, we believe in and worship a loving, liberated, and life-giving God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We believe in following the teachings of Jesus Christ, whose life, death, and resurrection saved the world. Gives us a sense of the belief statement that the congregation offers. And then one of the things that I think they do best is pulling together people for conversation and discussion. And they're able to bring in people like Jose Andres, who's, what's the name of his World Central Kitchen. They've been providing meals all over the world, particularly lately around disasters in different places. They're able to bring in people like the chaplains of Congress, Barry Black and Margaret Kibben. John Meacham is on the cathedral staff now as the cathedral historian. And he preaches once a year, twice a year maybe, and I think continues to teach at Vanderbilt as well. Andrew Young, Barbara Brown Taylor, Nadia Bowles-Weber. So it's really people who are in the midst of the faith conversations, the church conversations, who are published and who are well known, that they're able to bring in and have hold panel kind of forums and discussions. It's a unique opportunity that they provide. In 2019, the Washington Nationals won the World Series, and the Washington National Cathedral got involved. The curly W is the symbol of the Washington Nationals. And if you go on YouTube and write in Washington National Cathedral organist, you'll hear the organist play on the cathedral organ the shark song, Baby Shark song, that was so much a part of that season. And you'll hear a children's choir stand in front of the high altar and put Nationals hats on and sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." So the cathedral did its part that year. The Nationals haven't come close since. I want to share kind of 4 simple moments that are important for me. This is Dean Robert Willis, the retired Dean of Canterbury Cathedral. And the point of this is that Washington National Cathedral is a part of a network that's global. We heard him preach one Sunday when we were at the cathedral. But the intriguing part of his story for me is that during COVID-19, when the Archbishop of Canterbury shut down all the cathedrals and no one could go in any of them, Dean Willis and his partner looked at each other and said, you know, worship has been happening here since 600. We can't stop now. So they started what they called a garden. They did the daily prayer service from the cathedral garden, recorded it, and put it on YouTube. At first, it was a few dozen folks, then 100 folks, and eventually it developed to 18 to 20,000 folks who were following it. And I heard one number as high as 160,000 folks around the world, for whom, some of whom, this was their only contact with church or faith or any connection at all. And if you want to see a moving piece, look up Robert Willis' retirement And all these folks from all over the globe responded to what he had offered them during that time. I think he has some 900 episodes of daily prayers from the cathedral garden at Canterbury Cathedral. It's a remarkable online story and presence during COVID-19 when it was at its height. One Sunday I went down to the cathedral and I was at a particularly difficult point in my own journey relating to our congregation and relating to some other stuff. And I went down for worship, and I'm not a big architecture guy. I mean, this is striking, please. But I don't study architecture or spend a lot of time around it. But on that morning when I was at a low point, these columns in the cathedral, along with a psalm that was read, speaking of the foundations upon which our faith is based, and speaking of the constancy of God's love and care for us, really spoke to me. And I don't remember that I looked at the pulpit very often that morning, but I looked at those columns, and they were important, and they were. Another morning I went down, and this is again looking, I think, from the west entrance toward the front. Yeah, there's the pulpit. And at that point in time, they would have members of the parish bring the elements from the back here to the front for Eucharist. Ordinary folks out of the pew. And on that morning, there were 3 very young African-American girls who were carrying the wine and the wafer for the Eucharist. And they walked on this floor where kings and presidents and military powerful people and all manner of folks who possess all kinds of power, these young gals walked on that same floor. And it spoke to me of the sense of our oneness, our equality, our brotherhood and sisterhood. The cathedral provides that moment, that environment, that atmosphere of safety and hope, and the sense that we are all the same in God's eyes. It's a remarkable place. If you're near Washington, go for worship. You'll be blessed. Sorry, there's no time for questions. If you ask, my answer will be, I don't know. But you're welcome to come up and share your story or ask a question anyway. Thanks so much for being here. Thank you.
Really good turnout.